over 10 million visitors each year, a tourism industry worth almost $11 billion. The Oregon coast, a 363-mile-long beach with complete public access, is a world-class destination for its unparalleled beauty and majesty. It would take a man born in 1913, the same year that Oregon's beaches were first preserved for the public, to broaden and enforce Oregon's natural treasure in what would become known as the Oregon Beach Bill. In 1967, Oregon Governor Tom McCall took a stand for the people's rights to the free and public use of Oregon's beaches when he championed the Oregon Beach Bill. This landmark legislation ensured that the public would forever have access to their beloved Oregon beaches. Oswald West, Oregon's progressive governor from 1911 to 1915, was concerned about an issue that would come to define his term. In 1874, the Oregon State Land Board began selling public tidelands to private landowners. By the turn of the century, already 23 miles of the Oregon coast had been sold to private parties, and West feared that more sales were on the way. In 1913, during the height of the Progressive-era conservation movement, West moved to preserve the shore. He pushed through legislation using a clever loophole in the state's Public Highway Act to declare Oregon's wet beaches, the sandy area that the ocean waves would touch between low and high tides, as a public highway. To justify this move, West cited the practice of locals using the beach as a flat surface which allowed them to easily travel by wagon along the coast, along with an 1899 Clatsop County law that mandated land between low and high tide in that county be designated as a public highway. Despite the heroic efforts of West, over the decades, up to 112 miles of Oregon coastline had been sold to private owners, even though the state itself considered the land public. The state's attempts to stem the sales were increasingly met with opposition by some citizens, saying those efforts violated their rights to private ownership of the land, especially after the construction of Highway 101, which ran along the length of Oregon's coastline. Tom McCall was born into wealthy, well-connected families. His grandfather, Samuel McCall, served 20 years in Congress before becoming governor of Massachusetts. His maternal grandfather, Thomas Lawson, was one of the richest men in the world at the turn of the century, worth over $40 million. In 1910, Henry McCall married Dorothy Lawson. Henry longed to be a rancher, so Lawson bought the young couple 640 acres near Prineville, Oregon, and built them a large home. In 1913, Dorothy's father insisted she move back to Massachusetts to deliver his grandson, Tom McCall, and 4 siblings. During the summer, young Tom spent his time in Oregon with his father. In the 1920s, due to financial loss, all the children and their mother moved to Oregon. The beauty of Central Oregon is what drove McCall to become the environmentalist that he would become so well known for. McCall went on to major in journalism at the University of Oregon. Upon graduation, McCall moved to Idaho for a newspaper reporting job and often wrote about his great loves, hunting and fishing. In 1942, Tom and his wife moved to Portland, Oregon, where he went to work for the state's largest daily newspaper, The Oregonian. In 1944, McCall went to work for Governor Douglas McKay. In his role as McKay's chief of staff for more than 2 years, he was the eyes and ears for the governor of Oregon. Portland's KGW Radio hired him and gave him a nightly show devoted to politics. Oregon began to recognize the name Tom McCall. In 1954, McCall ran for Congress but lost the election and returned to his job talking about politics for KGW Radio. In 1964, he decided to run for Secretary of State. He easily won the election based on his name recognition and how he had improved himself over the years. McCall set his eyes on becoming governor of Oregon and was elected in 1967.
I, Tom McCall,
do solemnly swear
that
I will support the Constitution of the United States
I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Oregon,
and the Constitution of the State of Oregon,
Some members of the state legislature refused to accept him as they believed he had just waltzed his way into office from his fame over the radio. His biggest challenge was to be taken seriously by experienced lawmakers. 1 year before McCall won the gubernatorial race, Cannon Beach motel owner William Hay had closed off a portion of the dry sand beach that he owned behind his beachside motel, the Surf Sand. In hopes of an additional attraction for his guest, Hay placed logs on the beach and claimed that anyone who wasn't staying at his motel could not use that section of the beach. Other beachfront property owners began to follow suit. Already, the State Highway Department was working to fix the loophole in the Public Highway Act that was still allowing land to be sold to private parties. This fix was to be found in House Bill 1601. Despite some early setbacks where the bill languished in committee, with the help of State Representative Sidney Bazette, a man of the people as much an environmentalist who sacrificed his political career for the bill, along with the support of many concerned citizens, they were able to get the bill back on track. But there were still many obstacles to the bill's passage. Supporters of the bill were faced with opposition from coastal legislators. Many argued that private property rights were under attack and the bill itself was too vague. In hopes of breaking the delay on the bill, McCall took action. With the media watching, McCall was flown to Cannon Beach on the northern Oregon coast in a helicopter to demonstrate the different proposals of what should be defined as the public beach. McCall planned this trip in a way to have the biggest crowd possible in attendance and to garner the most publicity.
But in any event, we must fight to reestablish, in fact, in the most meaningful way, the concept of the public ownership of our beaches established by that great Oregonian, Oz West.
On May 13, 1967, McCall took a group of Oregon State University scientists, state representatives, members of the press, and surveyors to Cannon Beach. Together, they began marking out the stakes of where the public access line should be. People who had been closely following the drama began sending letters to the legislature, and some groups began to gather on the beach to rally. That day, James Redden, a Medford Democrat, and Lee Johnson, a Republican from Portland, rewrote the beach bill to give the state the power to zone a beach it did not own and to outlaw any development or construction not allowed by the State Highway Commission. After 10 hearings, the beach bill finally was passed in the House by a whopping 57-3 vote and survived the army of legal challenges that followed. No votes came from coastal lawmakers who had opposed the bill at all costs. The Senate sent a bill to Tom McCall, who signed it into law on July 6, 1967. Oregon's beaches were now protected forever. Due to the Oregon Beach Bill, Oregonians and those who visit the state can enjoy the beach without the worry of being charged with trespassing or violating private land. In addition to setting aside the beach for recreational purposes, the Oregon Beach Bill also prevents those wanting to develop the beach in any way without first having to go through a permitting process to allow them to alter the beach in any way. A permit would even be required to modify the sand on the beach. Due to the Oregon Beach Bill, incidents like William Hayes' logs on the beach could not happen again. Oregon's Revolutionary Beach Bill acknowledged public easement of all beach areas up to the vegetation line, nevertheless of underlying property rights. The public has free and uninterrupted use of the beaches. While some parts of the beach remain privately owned, state and federal courts have upheld Oregon's right to regulate development of those lands and preserve public access. From the coast's ability to rejuvenate to its ability to thrill, the Oregon coast is, at the same time, serene and breathtaking. Its views are unforgettable to its many visitors. With trails to hike and whales to watch from a beach open for everyone's access, it is truly a people's beach.